San Antonio, the birthplace of Tex-Mex cuisine. You're welcome, world. And guess what? It's also considered the cradle of Latin civil rights movements. So I'm here at Mission San Jose. It's a relic of Spain's 18th century colonial influence. And over time, indigenous communities blended with the Spanish to create a unique Texan identity. San Antonio has a complicated history, though. It was a Spanish territory, then part of Mexico, and then finally a thriving U.S. city. But with each change came shifts in the border. And I don't have to tell you all the trouble that it's caused for us. This is a town with unmistakable Latin roots. Come on, what's Tex without the Mex? Today, Latinos are about 65% of San Antonio's population. And I gotta tell you, what was once a story of cultures fighting it out is now being reframed as a story of cultures coming together to make something better. And this is a city full of food, music, food, art, and food. Yo, I feel like it's almost time to get some food. Yo, where's my queso, homies? Yo, dog, I need my food now, not later. No, I'm starving now.
I'm meeting with poet, laureate, and native San Antonian, Carmen Tafoya, to understand what really incited the Battle of the Alamo and unpack its lasting effect on the Latinx community here.
Hello, Carmen.
Hi.
What a pleasure. Nice to meet you. I wanted to get to the root of our Latin origins in America, and the Southwest is our biggest origin story.
And San Antonio is a very special part of that story. The 1600s, the Spaniards came to establish the missions, but this area was already inhabited.
What were the indigenous tribes that were here?
Well, the Spaniards tried to erase a lot of those names, but they were basically Payaya peoples, what were later called Coahuilteca peoples.
And it was Texa, the Caddo word for friend that became Tejas in Spanish and later Texas in English. It's like a game of colonizer telephone. Spanish colonial rule ended in 1821 when Mexico won its independence. To boost the population, the new Mexican government invited Americans to settle in Tejas. But those settlers, known as Texians, refused to integrate or learn Spanish, and soon they outnumbered the locals. So to assert authority, President Santa Anna restricted immigration to the region and sent in troops. Sounds familiar.
My great-great-grandmother's great-grandfather was one of those soldiers.
Wow.
My ancestors were involved in this, both sides.
By 1836, Mexico was facing a full-on revolution. To crush the revolt, Santa Anna led an army of thousands to San Antonio, where a small group of Texian defenders awaited reinforcements in the Alamo mission.
The entire Mexican army's coming. This is serious.
You better do something, because that's a big-ass army.
On March 6, 1836, the Mexican army attacked the Alamo, outnumbering the Texians 10-1, and all the revolutionaries were killed. So weeks later, when Sam Houston secured Texian independence at the Battle of San Jacinto, "Remember the Alamo" was their rallying cry. So, an overreaching government done in by brave and independent rebels, aka the Texas origin story. But is that the whole story?
We hear about this noble cradle of liberty, that this was a fight for freedom and independence.
Propaganda.
It was the freedom to keep slaves, because the guys who came from Kentucky and Tennessee heard that Texas was a good place to go get a lot of land. The thinking from the Deep South at that time was plantations.
Right, more.
It was pre-Civil War.
Yeah.
The bigger your plot of land, the more slaves you can have, the more money you're going to make.
But Mexico was anti-slavery.
Mexico had outlawed slavery. They had a black president.
Look at that. So we were progressive.
That's right. Mexico's second president was an Afro-Mestizo man, Vicente Guerrero. And in 1829, he abolished slavery, 34 years before the Emancipation Proclamation.
What is the damage, do you think, that happens when history is only told from one side?
We do a disadvantage to everybody, because that's not real life. And it doesn't develop any maturity in us.
After the revolution, anti-Mexican sentiment took hold and persisted as the Republic of Texas became the state of Texas in 1845 and into the 20th century. And Carmen felt that discrimination firsthand growing up in the 1950s. But she was a born renegade and wasn't gonna take it.
I was a 6-year-old kid. I broke the law 20, 30 times a day easily because it was against state law and school law to speak Spanish on school grounds.
Wow.
Kids were punished. They were paddled. Thick wooden paddles.
That's crazy.
Outlawing Spanish and basically our culture as well. Went from 1917 to 1969, the year I graduated from high school.
That you weren't allowed to speak Spanish, which was the first language spoken in this whole country.
Well, the first European language.
First European language. Thank you
Yeah,
for correcting me
yeah.
on that. Keep me honest. I'm
No,
sorry, I
it
had
was
to
the first-
decolonize my mind. Sometimes it's a little difficult.
We have been treated like we're a foreign people, but we didn't cross the border crossed us several times with several countries.
And you're still here.
We're still
and I'm so
here.
glad you're still here.
History may be written by the victors, but there will always be people like Carmen who seek out and illuminate the full story.
Hey. Hi, how are you? Welcome
Hola.
to mi tierra, cariño.
Good to see you
Cariño,
again.
great
Good
name.
to see you again.
Cariño, that's a beautiful name.
Our family's been in this business for 80 years. I think this is 80 years
80
old.
plus years, so we've been here since 1941. My grandfather was from Guadalajara. He came as a young man and he worked for his aunt and uncle's butcher shop. He was delivering meat one day to this restaurant, and the owner of the restaurant was just kind of fed up with the business, and he threw the keys and said, "You want to buy this place for $150? So
Wow.
he actually borrowed the money and he opened Mi Tierra.
It's massive.
Pedro Cortez and his wife, Cruz, turned their little 3-table cafe into a Tex-Mex landmark. Remember when I said one guy hustled to save Market Square? Well, this is the guy. In 1961, when he heard the city planned to knock down the market for new development, Don Pedro bought the entire business block and spent years fighting for the revitalization that would preserve El Mercado and Mi Tierra for generations to come. With 5 restaurants, the Cortez family are bona fide Tex-Mex legends.
Hola.
I'm here to meet a woman who's been defending her hood since the 80s. Graciela Sanchez, director of the Esperanza Peace and Justice Center.
What a beautiful spot.
Yeah,
Right?
well, it's called the Rinconcito de Esperanza, which is a project of the larger Esperanza Peace and Justice Center.
All right.
It's the neighborhood I grew up in. I went to the public schools here, and so did my mom, who graduated in 42. But all her life, she said they always talk negatively about the West Side.
Yeah.
And it's like, why? It's like, because we're Mexican. As I saw my whole neighborhood get demolished in the 1970s.
Through urban renewal?
Urban renewal, exactly.
Oh, which is the key word of the destruction of people of color's neighborhoods.
When I was 10, 11, 12, there was a yearning that I've had since then, to find that neighborhood that I once lost.
After graduating from Yale, Graciela returned home to the West Side to invest all those Ivy League smarts back into her barrio. Founded in 1987, Esperanza promotes social justice and cultural understanding through arts and education programs. We're talking historic preservation, film festivals, public spaces, art installations, and concerts. Anything they can do to bring people together to share, listen, and advocate for their community and other marginalized groups.
Why all this love to stay in this neighborhood and reclaim the neighborhood?
The racism of this country says that if you're brown, if you're poor, if you're working class, if you're dark skinned, that's where all the trouble is. And that's just a stereotype. And we're trying to break those stereotypes and look for the tesoros.
Looking for the treasures, yeah.
Esperanza has tirelessly protected the rights of West Side residents. And I gotta say, they're pretty badass. When outside buyers started snatching up property to demolish and redevelop, Esperanza beat them at their own game. They bought up buildings too, ensuring permanent low-income housing and keeping tenants from being pushed out. And in 2024, they received a federal grant of over $1 million to keep going. In your face, gentrifiers.
It's so good to have you guys here because I find this city really important to me. It was where a lot of resistance came against segregation. So I want to get like your opinions about what's going on with the Latin people here in San Antonio. What's going on in Texas?
Well, there's a lot happening in San Antonio. I think we believe that San Antonio is what most of the nation will one day look like. Maybe not as many Latinos in one city. Now, having said that, it's a sad day in Texas in a lot of ways too, because of the politics of Texas. But of course, that's something that many people are working towards changing.
Y'all, Texas has been in the news a lot in the last few years for its severe approach to immigration. But the low point came in November 2023, when the Texas legislature passed Senate Bill 4, one of the most extreme anti-immigrant laws in history, which allows police to detain and arrest anyone they suspect of being here illegally. In March of 2024, the Supreme Court upheld the law, but advocacy groups are continuing to fight it.
We are facing an invasion on our southern border.
Rapists, murderers, even terrorists.
Good afternoon, and thank you for being here. My name is Rhonda Grimm. I'm president of NCJW San Antonio, and I'd like to welcome you to our third annual symposium, once again held in the esteemed Trinity University. I'd like to start by giving a very warm welcome to area clergy. If you are a member of area clergy, could you please rise, and everybody, could we give these folks a very inspiring round of applause. At the beginning of our fiscal year, NCJW San Antonio chose immigration in Texas as our umbrella theme. Much of the work we've done this year has been through the lens of immigration and its impact on our city. As a major city in a border state, San Antonio sits at the crossroads of this national immigration debate. As you could see in the film, the immigration, our diversity, has shaped our culture, has fueled our economy, and has defined much of who we are as a community. No doubt we can all agree we are at a moment of tremendous change. Texas has long relied on immigration to drive population and workforce growth, but recent trends show a noticeable slowdown. That shift raises important questions about how our economy will grow and how our communities will continue to evolve. It also raises questions about the impact these changes have had on families, women, and children, the care and advocacy for whom are pillars of NCJW values. So, today's discussion is much more than just about policy. It's about our future. It's about how do we support growth? How do we ensure our communities remain strong, inclusive, and forward-looking? And how do we protect those most vulnerable to these changes? So these are complex questions, and that's why conversations like the one we're having today are so important. I know we're all looking forward to the discussion, but to kick things off, I am thrilled to introduce the amazing Leslie Davis-Met. Leslie Davis-Met is the director of the Holocaust Memorial Museum of San Antonio. She brings over 25 years of experience in a nonprofit arena, focused in areas of Jewish communal service, community relations, and human relations. Leslie previously held positions at the Jewish Community Relations Council of Dallas, Heart Gift San Antonio, and the San Antonio Area Foundation. In 2010, she was the interim director of the Holocaust Memorial Museum. Leslie was born in San Antonio. She is fourth generation in this community. She is married to Mike Met. They have 2 kids. Ladies and gentlemen, Leslie Davis-Met.
Good afternoon, everyone. I was honored when Sharon Mullen reached out to me a few months ago and asked me to give some opening remarks this morning or this afternoon. And at first, I questioned why she would be asking me, as the director of the Holocaust Memorial Museum of San Antonio. And as I began to reflect upon it, it made perfect sense. Because if we don't learn from the past, we can't move forward in the future. So in doing some research and preparing remarks for this morning, I came across the fact that one of the most enduring moral teachings in Jewish tradition is the commandment to welcome the stranger. This instruction is repeated throughout the Torah, again and again, reminding us that memory is meant to shape responsibility. The Jewish story is in many ways a story of strangers, a story of displacement, of being outsiders, of depending upon the compassion of others. And so this commandment is not simply about hospitality, it is about empathy, about recognizing that how we treat those who feel vulnerable or different defines who we are as human beings. That lesson became tragically clear during the Holocaust. Jews across Europe were turned into strangers in the most devastating way imaginable, stripped of their rights, isolated from their communities, and denied their humanity. Families fled their homes, searching for refuge, hoping that somewhere someone would open a door. And too often, those doors remained closed. And the consequences of that silence are part of what we remember and we mourn today. But there were also individuals who chose a different path as upstanders, people who risked everything to help others. They hid families, protected children, and offered shelter. And in doing so, they made a different choice, to see a human being where others only saw an other. Today we remember the courage of the upstanders, not only to honor the past, but to examine our present and where we are today. Because the question of how we treat the stranger did not end with the Holocaust in 1945. In our world today, we are once again confronted with images of families living in fear, uncertain if they will be allowed to stay, unsure if a knock on the door could change their lives dramatically. Debates around immigration, policies, and enforcement carried out by agencies like the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement can feel distant and sometimes political. But at their core, they are about people, about human beings, about families. And it can be easy in the midst of these debates to lose sight of that, but we cannot. It can be easy to turn away, to say it is complicated, to convince ourselves it doesn't pertain to us and it's not our responsibility. But history warns us about where indifference can lead. The Holocaust did not begin with violence. It began with separation and isolation, with language and attitudes that divided us from them, with neighbors becoming strangers to one another. And that is why this teaching still matters so deeply today. Welcoming the stranger asks something more of us. It asks us to resist the instinct to withdraw, to choose compassion, even when it's uncomfortable, to remember that every person carries a story, every person carries a family, and a hope for safety and dignity. For many Holocaust survivors, what stayed with them was not only the cruelty they endured, but the courage of one person who chose to help them, one person who opened a door, one person who said, in effect, "You are not alone, I am here with you." One act of humanity can restore hope in the darkest of moments, and that truth still holds today. Each of us here, each of us in our communities, has the ability in small but meaningful ways to push back against fear and division, to listen more closely, to speak with care, to see the humanity in someone whose story we may not fully understand. And we help shape a different future, a future where one's difference does not lead to division, but to deeper understanding of one another. Because welcoming the stranger is not only a Jewish value, it is a human value. And the kind of world we create, one defined by fear or by compassion, depends on the choices we make with one another every day. So I ask you to join me in becoming an upstander. Let us define our world by compassion and not fear. It is now my honor to introduce this afternoon's panel to you and invite them to join me on the stage. Kate Lincoln-Goldfinch, Congressman Joaquin Castro, State Representative Diego Bernal, and moderator for this afternoon's discussion, the TPR talk show guy, David Martin Davies.
Hey y'all, it's good to see all y'all here today. Beautiful day outside and here y'all are. Little background on what we're doing today, how we got here. Originally, the idea, because you see we have Joaquin Castro and Diego Bernal, they're both Democrats. Kate, she's an immigration attorney. Okay. She has outed herself as a Democrat. Originally, we were going to have a Republican congressman with us to try to have a more, nuanced back and forth debate. We had an agreement with Tony Gonzalez from the 23rd Congressional District, and he dropped out. Who knows what happened there. So last year, we had a similar event, and we were talking about the separation of church and state. And with me in this chair was a little-known state representative by the name of James Tallarico. He's gone on to do some incredible things. We'll see where he goes next, but we can always, maybe the next person who sat in that can, join that pathway. So my objective today, we're going to talk about the realities of what's happening with the mass deportation, immigration that's happening today in the United States, looking at it from the humanitarian aspect that we heard from just now, but also the practical aspect. Is this good public policy? Is this making America great again? We're hearing, there's a really good argument that it's not. And we're going to hear about that. But really, we need to, this is a hard issue to really understand, to see how it's really impacting people on a day-to-day level. The cruelty, so the cruelty is the point. The incompetency is also the point. There's a lot happening in this sphere that we really have got to understand in order to engage in the democratic process to fight for better public policy. And so that's my objective today. And so we'll see if we can get there or not. That's the question. So let's go down the line. We're going to hear from each of y'all. Each of y'all occupy a different sphere, different lane in talking about this issue. We can hear from Congressman Castro about where it looks like from his view, nationally speaking. Also, Kate talked about her incredible immigration firm that she has. She has a bus that goes around, a mobile immigration consulting bus. We want to hear about that. And also from Representative Bernal, we can hear about what's happening on the state level. The state of Texas is very much involved. We have the State National Guard in Dilley helping run that center, that facility, and whether or not there's proper state oversight or not, we can get into that. But we're going to keep this part short, and I really want to hear from Representative Castro about what you learned in Dilley with the Liam case. But first, let's talk about what's happening. And we have the partial government shutdown. We have No King's Day yesterday. We have a lot of activation. What are you seeing right now?
Well, I think, first of all, David, it's great to be with you. Thank you for moderating, and also, of course, to my fellow panelists and to the San Antonio chapter of National Council of Jewish Women. Thank you all so much for convening us and for convening this conversation right now. Just quick context, as you all know, throughout American history, there have been times where our country has become quite anti-immigrant. and nativist. And we are living through one of those periods right now. And so, when we talk about the situation with the Department of Homeland Security, I know there's been a lot of debate about the shutdown. We finally, I thought, had an agreement in the Senate that the House would pass to fund everything at the department except for ICE and CBP enforcement because of the way that it's been done and the violation of people's rights. Unfortunately, Speaker Johnson and the Republican majority in the House didn't go for that, and so sent back over what's called a continuing resolution, full funding for ICE and everything else in DHS, so that ping pong battle continues. But remember, through what was called a big beautiful bill last year, ICE got an extra $75 billion on top of its annual allocation. So it's not a question of whether ICE has the money that it needs to function. It certainly does. It's whether the Trump administration is willing to use that money from the big beautiful bill to cover these daily operations. And then, just very quickly, I think what's been going on is very, very dehumanizing. There's a brutality that we've seen on the streets of the Twin Cities, but also in Chicago and Los Angeles and other places. But there's also a brutality that most people don't see behind the closed walls of what are essentially prisons. Dilley is a trailer prison, and it's the only place in America that I can think of where we imprison children who have not committed any crime. The youngest child when I first went there was 2 months old. Liam Ramos was 5 years old when he was there. And so, for me, when I think about what we stand for as a country, I think we're better than that. And I can't wait for a course correction in the November election and then in 2028 and what's to come.
Kate, how are you seeing things? I mean, you have a very active practice at your own law firm, and you were dealing a lot with expedited removals. How is this tearing families apart?
I want to echo the Congressman's gratitude for this event. These events are really important, and it's an honor for me to be here up on this panel. I've been an immigration lawyer in Texas for 20 years, and I became an immigration advocate in law school. I signed up for the immigration clinic. It was during the Bush presidency, and the first detention center for families had been opened, and I was sent to do an intake with a family that was detained there. It was a mom, a dad, and a little 5-month-old baby girl, and they were all wearing prison uniforms. Her little onesie was a little prison onesie. And her mom asked me if I would take her baby and take care of her until they could get out of that detention center. And that night I went home and I just sobbed. I had been so naive about what this country stood for until I saw it with my own eyes. And ever since then, I've been working with families who are facing the consequences of brutal immigration policies throughout varying administrations. But nothing in what I've seen is like what is happening today. This mass scale of detention of people and families is so brutal and violent. And one major difference is that historically in the last 20 years, when there has been family detention, most of the people detained are detained temporarily, and they are people who came to the border seeking asylum. And it's never been okay. But that's the difference. And essentially in the first day of the second administration, Trump hit the reset button to the end of the first administration and essentially closed the border and then turned their sights to the interior enforcement. And that's when we've seen families who are living and existing and doing everything the right way for decades, many of them, get swept up and taken and disappeared from their families. And we're seeing big actions like what happens in Minnesota and Chicago. And that's brutal and violent, and it stirs a public outrage. But one thing that I think is really important, and this is why I think these forums are so important, is that what's happening in Texas is as massive in scale as what we saw in Minnesota, more so, but it's invisible. And it's insidious, and it's because of state policies in Texas. It's because Greg Abbott deputized DPS to become immigration enforcers. And really probably every single one of us in this room has driven by someone being disappeared and taken from their families on the streets without even realizing it, because DPS troopers and some other law enforcement agents in Texas pull people over on pretextual traffic stops and take them. And we don't see it. And so we don't have the same massive outrage and upswell in Texas, but more people are being disappeared, and many of them are pressured into signing a deportation immediately and they're gone. And also many of them are held in detention indefinitely in these horrific conditions. And as lawyers, we're having to take most of these fights on an individual case-by-case basis into federal court to get habeas, because immigration court is a mess and they won't grant bond. And so people are detained when they're lucky for 3 or 4 months and paying thousands and thousands of dollars. And I'm talking 20 years in this country, no criminal history, U.S. citizen kids, good, decent, hardworking people plucked off the road because their license plate was askew. And these kids, I see these cases up close. I know many of us have. I mean, and you can just imagine the trauma of something like that. And some of these kids watch their parents get taken. And it's horrific and heartbreaking and cruel, and I believe that cruelty is the point. And so we have to stay aware and informed and absolutely outraged, which I know we all are, and that's why we're here.
Representative Bernal, he talks about what's happening from the view from the state capitol, sure. Texas National Guard, what's happening in Dilley, and you should be able to go to Dilley. They're using Texas dollars to fund that place, but you're not allowed to.
We should. First, again, thank you guys for having us part of the tribe. This could easily be a family gathering for me, well, for one half of the family, obviously. And also, though, I want to just take this moment to thank the two of them who, I have an opinion and a point of view and an experience in the state capitol, but compared to these two, they're working on this every day, producing results, saving people's families, saving people's lives. And so I want to just take a minute to thank them for their tireless 24/7 work. So Texas is the petri dish for this. We're the laboratory. Everything that you're seeing nationwide has been tried and tested in Texas already. And that's why I believe Texas was so prepared to take part, right? To add to that cruelty. The infrastructure was already set up to execute this plan that we believe was conceived in DC, but really it wasn't. We were trying to do this in Texas for over a decade, and we were able to resist and get little pieces, and finally the wave just came, and here we are. I agree 100% that cruelty is the point. I think it is important to say that the genesis and the impetus in large part is racist. They're going to immigration courts in my district, in our district, for people who are going and doing it the right way and taking them. I'm glad you used the word disappear, because that's exactly what it is. And if this had been 60 years ago, they would have taken my dad, who never became a citizen. He was an LPR. He had these court dates. You know, decent guy, good kids, right? So, and I've got other people in my family who are immigrants through marriage, who are not Mexican or Latin American. They're European. They're fine. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm saying it doesn't happen nearly as much, right? The stops that you're talking about, the people they're targeting, who they're looking at in the courthouses, it's very clear, it's very obvious. So I think, yes, it is wrong. Yes, it is illegal. Yes, cruelty is the point, but it also sends a message, and it is focused on a certain group of people, right, that are undesirable and have also the problems of the state and the country have been laid at the feet, and the finger's been pointed at them and saying, this is why all the things wrong in your life are because of them. And there's no group that should understand how harmful it is more than the people in this room. And so I think it's important that we can have a policy discussion, but if we're being super honest, it is one of the most racist things that we've seen in our lifetimes. And we're not even looking back on it. We're literally in the middle of it. And that's why it requires the kind of attention that we're trying to give it today, because as we saw in Minnesota, that is the only way that things change. And no offense to any one of the three of us, but we're sort of like the punctuation marks at the end of sentences written by the public, right?
Okay. So, Joaquin, can you talk about how you came to the Liam Ramos story, and how is he doing right now? I understand he has been
doing okay. You know, they lost the first round of their asylum case, so they're appealing now, and that appeal, as Kate knows, can go for months or, you know, historically even years to finally get a final resolution on it. You know, I had, in the first Trump term, I was chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus for 2 of those years and had arranged the first rally against family separation on June 1st, I believe, of 2018 on the west side of San Antonio. And so when Donald Trump got elected again in November of 2024, we knew what was coming, and we suspected that it would be worse, and it has been worse. And so right away last year, my staff and I started jumping into and started getting a lot of outreach from people who were ending up. There are multiple Texas facilities, those of you all that follow these issues closely. In addition to Dilley, there are immigration detention centers in Pearsall, in Carnes, in Port Isabel, in the Rio Grande Valley. There are ORR facilities. So there's a lot of this immigration detention and shelter infrastructure in Texas. And so, you know, we jumped into it again. And when the case of Liam Ramos happened, there was this period where members of Congress, we had been able to just show up at these detention centers and go inspect them. But the Trump administration started forcing us, and then this was litigated, but forcing us to give 7 days notice. So while this was being litigated in court, that was still the rule. And I saw the story break about, you know, we saw Liam with his backpack, the Spider-Man backpack, and his blue cap, and it was just an incredibly cute picture of a young boy that could have been in San Antonio or anywhere in America. And I had put in a request the day before to go a week later to Dilley. So I heard that he was going to be sent to Dilley, and I thought, well, I can do something about this because I'm scheduled to go there in 6 days. And that's how we jumped into the middle of it. And then, of course, we got in contact with his lawyers and ultimately the family, and were able to, I think in late January, something like January 28th, is when I went to go visit. I went to go inspect that center, and Jasmine Crockett was with me. And you may have seen that picture that we took of him lying in his father's arms. And he didn't wake up the entire time that I met with them for, I can't remember if it was 30 or 45 minutes that we sat with them. And then 3 days later, about 3 days later, I was actually with James Tallarico at a rally in Austin on all these issues on ICE. And we got a call from his lawyer saying, because they filed a writ of habeas corpus that was successful. Judge Beery, if anybody knows Judge Beery. And Judge Beery went to Jefferson High School just like Diego and I did, if there are any Mustangs here. So Judge Beery, signed off on the writ, and the lawyers called me on Saturday and said, can you all help us and pick him up? And I was in Austin, so we drove down from Austin over to Dilley. and then that's the video that you probably saw of when we're, you know, helping them carry their stuff out. It's like a prison. When you go in there, they take all your stuff, they put it in a bag, they check it in, and when you come out, they give you your stuff back. And yeah, and he was, you know, they were elated, and the first thing that he wanted was a Happy Meal, and so we took him to McDonald's to get a Happy Meal.
So I've talked to immigration attorney Eric Lee. He's described the conditions in there, that the water is undrinkable, the food is putrid, just the conditions are inhumane. I mean, can you talk about that?
Yeah, especially inhumane for kids. Yeah, folks had complained about things like worms in the food. Also, there were kids and adults that have, those folks that may have food allergies or gastrointestinal issues, for example. This place doesn't make any accommodations for that. So, you know, they basically serve you what they serve you. So, yeah, it's really, there were a lot of people there whose medical needs were not being met, who were making pleas to the staff to help them, and that care was either delayed or sometimes just denied completely. And you know, that was a story over and over again. And I say it's a trailer prison because it's a series of trailers when you walk in there, and it's 12 people per room, so multiple families per room. The families are actually still separated because the men are not allowed to stay with the women and children. They're in another area. So they are still separated you know, in the evening. And so when we heard about the measles outbreak, for example, or at least 2 people had measles, the first thing I thought about was 12 people in a room in very close quarters and what that would mean for any kind of outbreak. And, you know, and so, yeah, those are no conditions. Really, remember, nobody at Dilley, ICE is the one that told me this the first time I went, no one at Dilley has committed a crime. So we talk about the kids, but even the adults, many of these folks were people that were showing up for their asylum hearings. And they got, you know, they showed up for a hearing, and instead of going in front of the, you know, or being able to go home afterwards, they were basically handcuffed and taken in and sent to rural Texas. And so nobody's committed a crime, and yet they're being treated like criminals. And then also, David, you know, the last thing on this, 2 things actually. With respect to the kids there especially, we're all attorneys actually. Those kids don't have any legal rights really when they go in front of that judge. They don't have a right to counsel. So they'll sit there, young kids will sit there not understanding what the legal proceedings are that will determine whether they get to stay in the United States or they're deported. I mean, if you think about it, in terms of legal counsel, they literally have less rights than a convicted serial killer. I mean, really, a convicted serial killer would have a public defender. These kids have no one. The other part of the system that's very ironic, really quick, is that we've commodified, in this case with Dilley, child imprisonment, child suffering. The reason I say that is because some of the nation's largest asset managers own stakes in Core Civic that owns Dilley and operates Dilley. Remember, it's ICE on the public side and the Texas National Guard on the public side, but then it's also a private company, Core Civic, that operates Dilley. And so they're the ones that organize education, the meals, you know, the education. There was no education there for 11 months, no schooling at all for any of the kids. And we have essentially commodified that in the United States to allow for people to invest in it, which I think in its own way is grotesque.
Kate, if you could talk about, because you're tuned in also to the very rural aspect of what is happening, because your law firm has been pioneering about how to bring these services to people who are not in the big cities. You have your yellow school bus, and but I'm really interested in how these mass deportations are hurting counties, agricultural centers, places where this labor is vitally important for us as a nation, as an economy, and what are you seeing there?
So we don't have to divide between rural and urban when we talk about impact on economy, because it is across the board.
Yeah, but what is happening there is basically invisible to I mean, I really want to get out there and see what's happening, but I don't know how. So is it invisible?
The impact on the economy is not invisible, but you have to look for it and look for the data. The truth is, every sector of our economy has been impacted by immigration enforcement, at least indirectly. You look at, they added the $100,000 fee to the H-1B visas, then they targeted all the student visa holders. So people who are highly educated, highly skilled, are less likely to come and work in the United States, and of course that impacts STEM fields and entrepreneurship. And then there are more traditional immigrant sectors, hospitality, agriculture, construction, landscaping, and those sectors are all down by 30% in Dallas. 40% of construction workers are immigrants in Texas. And so every sector is really suffering. And in the agricultural sector, there have been raids on farms which have resulted in actual workers being detained and deported, but fear of raids has driven down labor in the agricultural sector. And so the response to that by the Trump administration was to expand agricultural worker visas, but what they did when they expanded those options is they drove down the wages by 30%, and they did things like saying, oh, now when you provide housing for seasonal agricultural workers, you can count that as part of the wage. When people who jump around to farms in different, they go pick, strawberries in Colorado, they stay in trailers on the farms. Housing is just part of the work. And now the Trump administration has said, well, we can count that as part of the wage. And so it's driving down wages for farm workers. And so all across every sector, but particularly agricultural sectors where our economy is definitely suffering. And this is, of course, at a time when our baby boomers are aging and we need more workers, and our birth rates are down. We need people who will care for the elderly. 1 in 2 home healthcare workers in the state of Texas is an immigrant. And so we're really cutting off our nose to spite our face. And I know we all know that, but this nation desperately needs immigrant labor, not only because it creates the vibrancy of our nation, but actually just our economy, in order to survive, needs immigrant labor. And that's why the rhetoric of conservatives and MAGA and the Trump administration and this anti-immigrant sentiment that we're in is so dangerous, because when these politicians campaign, using those words that we see Greg Abbott use about immigrants, then they're hypocritical if they get into office and they do anything pro-immigrant. And so it's really dangerous, this rhetoric. And I think that, frankly, one of the ways that our team has failed is in balancing out the rhetoric and the conversation. I think we're doing better now because it's so acute, but I think that during the Biden administration, there was a lot of time when, if we weren't talking about immigration, that was kind of a good day. And we allowed the definition and the rhetoric and the language around immigration to just get out there into the ether. Rapists, murderers, eating the pets, all that stuff. And we weren't loud enough over here about, hey, that's not true. Statistics, data, the economy, but also just, we've come so far, we don't even really talk about celebrating immigrants anymore. Just restaurants and culture and music and art and just all of the ways that immigration makes this country fun and bright. And so I don't know exactly where I was going to go with that, but that's what it's like. Can we get back to that? That's what the bus is all about. Like, we put cumbia music on, have bubble machines, and we're handing out Know Your Rights cards and free legal resources, but we're like, let's make this a party. Should be fun, when we get a bunch of immigrants together.
Right. So Texas, they're trying to, the leadership, they have practical issues. These are practical problems. Dealing with the housing costs, dealing with the rising cost of food, trying to deal with, getting oil out of the ground. All of these things require immigrant labor. how are they going to square that circle when that labor is gone? I mean, how does the leadership? I know that they're turning now to Sharia law and these other things that they're concerned about, but don't they have to answer for the problem that they created?
I love the way you asked the question. No, they don't have the answer. I think part of it is, my mom has this great phrase, which is, you have to be ready to get what you ask for, right? And I think that's what's happened in Texas, is that they pushed so hard. I know you were trying to get me to this point, and Joaquin touched on it, but I want to make it clear. When we think of immigration, we think of the federal government. And we think of Dilley, we think it's a federal facility, and it is. And what that means to most of us is that local electeds, local government, state government can't touch it. But to drive the point home, Texas is actively participating in the operations of Dilley because on Greg Abbott's order, the Texas National Guard is there. And not just that, but they're helping run it, they're helping house it, they're helping keeping families and children detained in these sort of subhuman conditions. Do not let the state of Texas off the hook. It's not just that they've tried to pass all of these bills, they're actively participating in the activity. So there's that. Greg Abbott, in particular, so badly wants an attaboy, like a belly rub from Donald Trump, that he's not really willing to do or say anything. And you're watching this play out in the primary between Paxton and Cornyn, where they're both falling over themselves trying to be the one that daddy loves best, right? I mean, and Cornyn literally has pictures of him standing in front of Trump Burger and reading Trump's book. And so I didn't make that up. It's funny, but it's true. And so the point I'm making, not to be flip about it, but the point I'm making is that Greg Abbott so badly wants to be in the good graces of the governor, and so do other Texas Republicans, that they're unwilling to really pivot out. I really feel like they're trying to ride this out. And the reason I know that is because the legislature meets for 6 to 8 months every other year. We don't go back until January. In between sessions, you get what are called interim charges, which is a list of priorities that they want us to focus on and study and talk about and have hearings around the state. And none of this is on there. They came out 2 days ago. The interim charges came out 2 days ago, and none of this is on there. Sharia law is on there.
Taking 2 counties from New Mexico is...
And so is annexing parts of New Mexico. So I think that to get into the mind of politicians, the two of us excluded, is that for most of them, their seat is the most precious thing in their life. And they don't make decisions to serve people, they make decisions to keep being that thing, because they don't know who they are without being that thing. What scares them then is a threat to that thing. And the only real threat to that thing is people. And so information, conversation, right, demonstration, I didn't mean for that all to rhyme, but that was cool. All of that really matters. And if you want to go out and protest, protest. If you want to host something like this, do that. If all you can do is tweet or whatever it's called now, or post on Facebook, do that. But those things, those activities, it takes all types, all sorts. Those activities are the things that scare them into doing something different. So on paper, as they've telegraphed to us, they have no plans. But I do believe that they can be scared into changing course, or we just change the people, which is also fine, better actually.
You expect me to believe that they have no plan? That's like, launching a war against Iran and not having a plan.
I mean,
it's inconceivable.
It's politics over everything, right? And I always ask my colleagues, to what end? You probably have the same conversations. To what end? You're doing this, you're taking this position, you're falling in line behind this person. To what end? What is the end goal here? And they often don't know. They just want to keep being that thing. And I can tell you, the fringe benefits are not all they're cracked up to be. At all. I mean, the parking is great, but otherwise it's not that. And you know, Joaquin and I we've known each other for a super long time, probably about almost 40 years. And I tell him, like, you make Congress look very unsexy. You don't make it look like someone is dying to do it. But there's something about these seats that becomes the identity of these folks, and then they don't know what to do, and they panic if that identity is threatened. So that's what keeps them in line and makes them do things without a plan. It also is a way to either change them in terms of their activity, or we just switch them out.
So we've seen already in Congress, was it 56 members of Congress have decided they're not going to run for re-election. No incumbents are not running. Most of them are Republicans, vast majority, or if not all of them. And would they expect the number to hit 70, just looking at trends and how that would work? That seems to be a sign that they don't want to go back because they might be in the minority party next year. What difference would it make if the Democrats become the majority party, let's just say in the House, in regards to dealing with immigration?
Well, first, I think Democrats are going to take back the House of Representatives, and hopefully the United States Senate as well, right? You know, this is an interesting question because obviously I'm all for it. I want to see it. I think that we will take back the House. What would it mean? I think we would have more checks and balances against Donald Trump when it comes to things like what he's spending money on, because the Congress appropriates the money, but also for the investigations and oversight that we're able to do on what I believe is arguably the most corrupt administration in American history. So that will be very important. But I'm also concerned because I think that it could bring a period. This is a president who I believe has violated the Constitution, who has certainly pushed the limits of the Constitution, has at times ignored Congress and ignored the law. And the risk you run there is that a constitutional crisis could come when the Congress declares something, passes a law, you know, and the president ignores it. In the back of my mind, that's where I think you could have real issues. Right now, we haven't seen any of that because Mike Johnson and John Thune, the House and the Senate, under Republican control, have been completely subsumed by Donald Trump and the White House. They haven't offered any resistance. The legislative identity, Congress's identity, has really just merged with the White House. But what happens when that's no longer the case and you actually have a Congress that's going in a different direction? What is this president who has acted illegally at times, what is that president going to do? Is he finally going to follow what Congress is doing, as he should by law, or is he going to violate the law and ignore Congress? And so that's what I guess keeps me up at night right now, looking ahead.
I mean, could there be real investigations, real hearings, get some answers about why Homeland Security, how they do things? I mean, I have a story that's going to air on NPR this afternoon about these buoys that they're putting in the Rio Grande. They're going to put 500 miles of continuous buoys down the middle of the Rio Grande. It's incredible to see. It's like a giant orange pool noodle, you know, but in the middle of the river. Yeah. And the objective is to keep migrants from even getting onto the U.S. soil so they can't claim asylum. But it's also extremely dangerous to have these things in the river because when a flood comes, they could be washed downstream and they could damage bridges, railroad bridges, all sorts of infrastructure. We can't get any answers about why are they doing this and what are they going to do during a flood? You know, they don't answer to anyone.
No, I think that's absolutely been a problem. But yes, these investigations should happen. I think when it comes to ICE and the way ICE has conducted enforcement, what has also happened in the detention centers or prisons, I think that the Congress ought to form a special commission to investigate the abuses that have happened over the past, what at that time will be 2 years. But yeah, I mean, Greg Abbott, as Diego was saying, Greg Abbott has followed in lockstep with Donald Trump, and the Republican Party in Texas has just become more and more extreme, and the demands of some of, in the base of the Republican Party have become so extreme of their leaders that you see Ken Paxton and John Cornyn, for example, keep moving to the right further. And for John Cornyn, somebody who started as a fairly centrist judge at the Bexar County Courthouse, it is both sad and tragic and really unfortunate to watch somebody completely twist who they are, I think, or certainly who they were, to win public office again. But that's where we are.
Kate, what can you tell me about the lives of people who have been deported through this rapid deportation? Where do they go? How do they end up? What's their life like?
Well, it's different for everyone. And the truth is, I don't have a lot of contact with my clients once they go. Sometimes they check back in with me and let me know how they're doing. There's some that particularly stick with me, and I follow up with them. One of them was one of the first arrests at a courthouse. Her name was Carmen, and she went to legal hearing. 6 U.S. citizen daughters, U.S. citizen husband. The littlest of the girls was 7. And she was taken at the courthouse, and ultimately, after a couple of months in detention, she said, "I can't take it anymore. I got to get out of here." But during that 2-month period, I would visit their house, and the girls, they were all super into like hair and makeup and stuff they would do with their mom. She was real girly, and they all did that together. And watching them try to cling to that without their mom there was really sad to see. I mean, the girls were not getting along very well, and the littlest one was going down rabbit holes she probably shouldn't have been on TikTok, and the fridge was full of, old vegetables, and it was just, the absence of mom was so heavy in that house, and they all ended up going back to Mexico, but the 2 oldest girls were thriving in high school, and they didn't want to go. And they were worried about going and what it would mean for their future. And I tried checking in with that family, and I get we're fine, it's okay. But I guess what I can say is I have yet to connect with a client post-deportation who's celebrating and happy about it. I'm thinking of another client from El Salvador. He was a police officer, single dad, came with his son and was one of the early deportees in the second administration. And he was really worried about going back because a lot of them, once they come here and they have an asylum case and they've gone on record and they say stuff, it's even more risky for them to go back. And he was really worried about that. He was really worried about his son. And the last update I got from him was that it was just really hard for them to acclimate back to life and, without money in rural El Salvador from after living in Austin, with our public school system and all of that. So it's tough on people, and it's often dangerous for them to go back because even if they're not facing, asylum or political persecution, oftentimes people who go back to poor communities in other countries, they have this stigma of wealth. They've been living in the U.S. and they're coming back and they're very rich, and they get extorted or attacked by gangs just because they were in the U.S. and everybody knows about it. So it's not good. And I mean, this wasn't exactly the question, but we don't even really in this administration talk about asylum anymore. And I think it's relevant for this group that the reason as a nation we offer asylum is because of our failure to do so during World War II. And we became a nation that identified as one that protects people who are fleeing persecution. And we built out this very robust body of law and case law and identity as a nation about people. You come to our border and you tell us you need protection, and we will offer you that. And we turn everybody away now. And we're so focused on, I mean, we're in such a deep, dark hole that we're just trying not to get families who are living and existing in the United States to be separated. But I have a goal, a hope, that we stop doing that, and we shut down these horrific detention centers and get back to the point where we were, which is a nation of hope and a beacon of light where people who are fleeing something can actually come here and get protection, because that really is who we are.
So, Diego, I'm going to ask you a question, but I think I'm supposed to get some questions from the audience, and we'll get to those whenever that is about time. And so we're doing all this, according to the Republican leadership, is to make America safe. We heard from Greg Abbott that there are terrorists and rapists, all sorts of terrible people who are coming into the United States, and this is something that they have to do for national security. And also during the Donald Trump's presidential campaign, he was saying that it would getting rid of immigrants would lower the price of housing, all sorts of promises that really had no leg to stand on. But how do we process that? Okay, they told us one thing and we got something else. We know the polling shows that people are actually, Donald Trump still does very well in national polling on securing the border, yet the polling is really bad about the performance of ICE. So how do we square that in terms of like how do we have a conversation?
So I think what's happened is that, and it did feel this way and it still does, but not as much. It started to feel like political parties were religions. And I mean that by saying that someone at the head would say something and the public, or at least their public, would consume it and believe it, and that was it. There was no questioning. What I think has happened is that the rhetoric has started to not materialize in terms of the way people thought their lives would look or the way it would look on the ground. And now there's more skepticism. And I think that we have to capitalize on that skepticism, because even people who maybe bought into it before aren't with them anymore. I actually think that the public that agrees wholesale with everything that the administration, both the Texas and DC Republican administration are doing, that they agree wholesale, I think it's actually a very small group of people. I'm not saying that they're all Democrats now, they're all going to vote for all Democrats, but they might vote for a Democrat. They might vote for some sort of change. So I really think that exposure matters a lot. This is where what's happening to the national media and it consolidating gets very scary, because the controlling information, I think, is the next big frontier. The public is getting very, very savvy as to what is and isn't real. What's happening is that they're having to self-report, they're having to do it for themselves, because less and less, because media is consolidating, there are fewer and fewer trusted sources, fewer and fewer trusted voices, right? But I think that we're on the cusp of them not being able to hold on to it anymore. To the point in the question you asked Joaquin, my biggest fear is that Democrats have spent so much time telling you how bad Republicans are, that as a group, all of us are not ready to lead if we're given the opportunity. I think that Democrats have to be ready to lead the minute that we get to sit in the driver's seat. We can't catch our breath and take a few beats to get our bearings. I think we have to have people who are ready to go right away. That's where I think we are. I think that the dam is cracking, but we have to be ready.
So you want a Democratic Project 2027 or something?
I don't want anything. I don't believe in just doing the mirror image or photo negative, a reference very few of us get now, but of what they do. I do believe, and I'm not saying just Republican, Democrat, I do believe that we should put power and authority into the hands of better people, not people willing to play the same game just on a different team. I do believe in a moral authority and a greater good. So I wouldn't handle Project 2025 the way that they did. I would be very transparent and open about what we want to do and how we're going to execute it. Not tell them one thing and then do something else.
They're pretty transparent in what they wanted to do. Even now, they're still at CPAC up in Dallas-Fort Worth. They want to deport 100 million people. It includes American citizens.
Right, but what I'm saying, though, is that he distanced himself from that early on, and now they're still playing stupid. We know what they're doing. I just think that we should have a straight line. Just say, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, here's who's going to be in charge, this is what you can expect, your life should look like this in 10 weeks or 2 months, and then do that.
Congressman Castro, birthright citizenship, waiting for the Supreme Court to come down with the decision. What are you expecting? How big could this be?
Well, I mean, I believe and I hope that they will uphold birthright citizenship. It would be devastating, I think, for the country if they overturn it. I'm also watching the Voting Rights Act and what they do with that. If they overturn the Voting Rights Act, then I think that, assuming there's still a Republican majority at the time here in Texas, I think that the legislature will probably seek to redraw congressional districts as soon as they can. And those districts may look completely like spaghetti strings or something, because there are only so many protections after that would keep them from creating districts that, the districts, as you all know, look very oddly shaped now, but creating things that we've never seen before. And so those are the two big cases that I'm watching in terms of voting rights and rights of citizenship.
And you were part of the Texas quorum bust to try to highlight the redistricting that happened recently. Have things played out the way that you expected they would have played out?
No. But I do think it's
look, we saw the blue states are redistricting. Basically, Trump's effort to gain extra seats has not worked.
So there's two ways of looking at it. One is that we're very happy. One of the things we wanted to do was to make it a national conversation and get other states involved. I do think that that's happened. I think that the rest of the country has woken up, and now it's sort of an unfortunate game that we're playing.
But they would not have woken up had you guys not done the quorum bust.
Right.
It would have remained a local story that never really cracked the radar.
I'm proud of the work that we did, because we had two goals, though. So in that goal, I think we did accomplish. The rest of the country paid attention. Other state governments jumped to action. We're now playing the game at a national level and not a state level. It is a national conversation and a state conversation. The part that I'm sad about is that we left at a certain point, and then we actually had to come back in order to file a lawsuit to give ourselves the best chance in court we had to maybe overturn what Texas was doing. That part did not turn out so well.
Have you been fined by the state of Texas or dealt with any kind of repercussions from what you did?
Yes, currently I owe lots of money right now.
And they want to prohibit you from being able to run for re-election and other things?
They want to do all kinds of things. I think what they forget, and this goes back to the thing about who they are and what they care about, they're trying to scare us with the things that works on them. But it doesn't work on us. So those kind of tactics don't scare us. It would scare them because they're afraid. What are you gonna do? You're gonna make it so I can't run for office and then she takes my place? Cool. Like it's not a big deal, right? They're acting like this will get them. It's like no, that would get you. Doesn't work on us. We're not that worried about it.
So do you think that the Donald Trump ordering Texas to redistrict in order to gain 5 seats, has that failed, do you think?
I think it could. It's early in the game still, but I think it could. I also think that the way they drew Texas's lines, that they're not going to perform the way they expected to. I think they drew X number of new seats, expecting them to all turn red, and I think maybe only 2 will, and the rest might be blue.
Well, they based them on Donald Trump's numbers. But the problem for them is that Donald Trump was their most successful candidate. So,
especially with Latino voters.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. So I don't know why they didn't use the average, but they used Donald Trump's numbers, and I don't think their candidates will hit those numbers.
That's right.
And you were in redistrict, your house was out of your...
Yeah, they drew me out of my district by like a half mile or something. But it's still the 20th district. It's historic. Henry B. Gonzalez represented it for 37 years. Charlie. And I now have all of downtown and part of the east side, and still most of northwest San Antonio, a little bit of north central, and the west side of town where I grew up. So it's still the main San Antonio district, but one thing is it will be me returning, hopefully. I got to win in November, but it's a Democratic district, but also 3 freshmen or fresh women representatives, other members of Congress. Hopefully we have some Democrats in there, but it'll be myself and 3 freshmen. So I'm concerned about San Antonio and Bexar County because that makes a difference. So we're going to have to work hard to make sure we're working together, whoever's elected, for the city and the county.
You're keeping an eye on the 23rd Congressional District. It looks like between Brendan Herrera, the AK guy, and Katie Padilla-Stout.
Yeah, I'm all for Katie. Yes. Yeah, and she and I are supposed to meet up soon. Yeah.
All right, I have some questions from our audience. Can one of our panelists outline the pathway to shutting down Dilley and all detention centers? How can we help? How can the public help?
Well, the public, I believe, is the reason that when I first went to Dilley in January, late January, there were 1,100 people there. The next time I went, there were 450 people there. Last Monday, it was down to 102. So, thank all of you. Thank everybody who has spoken up, everybody who has posted on Facebook or Instagram or anything. Certainly the folks that have contributed legal defense funds, everything. We need to shut Dilley down and never reopen that place.
Like Miss Martha is the educator on TV on PBS. Miss Martha, is that her name?
Miss Rachel.
Miss Rachel.
Yeah, she started speaking up about it. There are a lot of folks. Like we've gotten so much outreach from 2 groups of people. Number one, y'all can imagine. I've gotten a ton of outreach from desperate family members who have, somebody will write me and say, my daughter is in there with her 2 kids, or my son's in there with his wife and their child. And then the other is people that want to help. So many folks that have reached out that want to help. And so we've tried to help direct folks, both to take on the cases where we can, and then also to direct folks to be helpful where they can be.
A question from the audience: what is your stance on Dreamers, specifically those in college? What is happening with Dreamers? Katie, are they being targeted as well for deportation?
Yes, they are here and there. Right now they're in legal limbo. They've been in legal limbo for a really long time. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals issued a decision finding that the program is now legal. However, Ken Paxton created an argument that Texas would suffer hardship by having to issue driver's licenses to Dreamers in Texas. So the Fifth Circuit found that of all 50 states, Texas on its own won't have to issue work permits to Dreamers. But that decision by the Fifth Circuit has to be implemented by the federal judge. Andrew Hanen is his name, and he received motions from both sides in late November, and we're still awaiting a final decision from him implementing what we think the outcome will be, which is the program is legal. DACA initial applications, meaning people who have never received DACA but qualify, can obtain DACA, but that Dreamers in Texas might face losing their work permits. And I don't know the inner workings of Hanen's, quarters or what's going on behind the scenes. My suspicion is that he understands the gravity of his decision and is being very methodical and thoughtful about it. Or maybe my hope. I don't know if any of the panelists have insights. I would love to hear them because I get asked by people literally every single day, what about DACA? Because there are hundreds of thousands of Dreamers in Texas, and these are people, of course, who were raised here, they have jobs, and these are people who are in their 20s or 30s. And, in that time of your life, you make a lot of decisions about, going to college or graduate school or getting married or buying a house or having children. And when you live your life in limbo in the way that they have, it puts those crucial early life decisions on hold. And I think that is the main pain of the Dreamers, is that they're just living in limbo, and ultimately they deserve and should have a pathway to permanent status, and we need Congress to pass that.
Diego, the state of Texas, I think just recently said work licenses for people who are non-citizens will not be renewed. So if you're a plumber, or you're a licensed plumber, I don't know who is involved in that, and what will that do to our labor force?
I mean, first of all, it would decimate the labor force. But beyond that, I think it makes the point I was making earlier, which is it doesn't matter if you're a gardener or if you're someone researching the cure cancer. You're a brown person not from here, and therefore you should be gone. It is their discrimination is indiscriminate in that way. And so they're looking for every avenue. I really don't think in many ways they want the world they're trying to create. I think they're just trying to stay in the good graces of the administration. I don't think that they've thought it all the way through. But nonetheless, they're still trying to, they're doing as much as they can to get the pat on the head. But have they thought about what it looks like for their own communities? No. And what normally happens is this. If it affects the big cities, they don't care because they see them as blue islands. But once it starts to make its way into the suburbs and the rural areas, then they blink. And so we'll see what that looks like.
Another question, will Congress pass the SAVE Act? And if they do, how will it affect the 2026 elections in Texas and elsewhere?
Well, first, I hope they don't. It's a way to make it harder for people to vote. That's the intention behind it. Texas, for example, years ago, as you all know, the legislature passed a voter ID bill. But there were, in that same year, in 2011, I believe, there were a series of smaller bills that got less attention that were also obstacles. Let me give you a direct example. It used to be in Texas that if you were registered, that you were deputized to register people to vote in Bexar County, you could go to Travis County or Frio County or wherever and also register people in those areas. One of the bills changed it so that you have to be deputized in every single county where you want to register people to vote. So that was an effort, for example, to hinder organizing and hinder the ability of people to go from place to place and register people to vote. The problem we have in the United States is not that too many people vote, it's that not enough people choose to go vote, right? So hopefully that thing stays stuck in the Senate and doesn't pass. But for women who have changed their name, for example, that's been probably the most glaring example. And again, I think I just caught it a few days ago, but I saw that Chip Roy was explaining how, I don't know if y'all saw this, how one of his employees, a woman, I think in Virginia, had trouble, I believe, registering to vote and got sent over, I don't know if she got sent over to the DMV or to some other office. Basically, the point was that she had to go take these extra steps. And that is going to happen to a lot of people in the United States of America if the SAVE Act happens, if it passes. And again, it's throwing obstacles in the way of people to vote because you think that you're going to win by attrition, right? It's a kind of point-shaving strategy. Like with voter ID, 95% of people may have their driver's license ready to go. But a lot of elections can be won in that 5% that show up, they don't have their ID, and so they decide, well, I got to go back to work. I don't have enough time to take care of this today, and so they don't vote. So it's all within those few points and within that margin. It's a kind, in Texas for them, for Republicans, those things have been a kind of insurance policy to help preserve the status quo politically. And to me, when I see that SAVE Act, it's a similar effort.
And that 5% who don't have a driver's license tend to be college students because they move around a lot and they don't have cars, they don't have to drive. It's very targeted. These tend to be progressive voters.
Right, that's right. It tends to be folks they don't think are going to vote for them are the ones that will be most affected.
But still, he's targeting mail-in ballots, and we know that the vast majority of people who do mail-in ballots tend to be older voters, and we know the makeup of the Republican Party is much older than the Democratic Party.
No, that's absolutely right. Donald Trump gets fixated on a lot of different things. He got fixated on, you all know, on Georgia, that the election was stolen from him in Georgia, and so they send the FBI out there to go confiscate ballots. He's been fixated on this idea of mail ballots for years, I think, since he first ran.
But he mails his own vote.
Yeah, that's right. He voted by mail in Florida. It was just
And
the
lost.
irony of all ironies. And so, yeah, so yes, he's fixated on mail ballots as well.
Question, I understand that congresspeople or candidates who don't agree with Trump get primaried and lose their seats. How can individuals compete with that? So Trump seems to have this power. Where does his power come from? How does he have a grip on the United States? And it is his endorsement, his ability to primary candidates. Let me go to Diego about how it works in Texas.
Well, this is the way it works in Texas. They draw, let's say, the state house lines in a way where it's going to go red or blue. They'll pack it full of, let's say, 80% Democrats or 78% Republicans, right? Then the only race that seems to matter is the primary, Dem against Dem, right? Republican versus Republican. And the only people who vote in those races are Republicans or Democrats. And so people run very far to the left, not really, very far to the right, very far. Then you'll have someone like Greg Abbott, who's got, $100 million and some change to spend on...
Probably more now.
On politics only. And then he'll come in, give an endorsement, and spend lots of money. And so it's very, very hard to win an election sometimes if people don't know who you are or what your message is. But again, real quick, I think that that's changing. I think that the activity of the public is changing that. Because I think the mistake that they're making is that the American public, the Texan public, is like them, and that is that they can be bought. And I think we're better than that. I think you're going to see elections in this round where, in this case, the Democrat is going to be at a tremendous disadvantage, money-wise, to the Republican. And I think they're still going to do very, very well, because in this moment, I don't think the money matters as much. But in those primaries, it is absolutely, absolutely everything.
Kate, we're going to close out here. So,
well, yeah, and I'll just agree with that. I just ran in a Democratic primary for Talarico's House seat, and I lost, which is not the end of the world for me. But the hardest part of campaigning for sure was fundraising. And I remember I went to the dentist, and he's a Republican, and he was telling me about how Abbott wanted him to run, and he got invited in by some high-level staffer to discuss it, and they just told him, don't worry about the money. We'll cover all that for you. And meanwhile, I'm just like calling every single person I know. It's a grind, and so that really, for me, showed the distinction of the money and what it's like as a Republican. But I also think it makes them softer and weaker, when they're just handed something like that. So it means Democrats are more scrappy. But if you want me to give final closing thoughts.
But I'm going to add real quick. So the money does matter in a lot of ways because they buy all the airtime and they run these ads about boys and girls bathrooms and all this that doesn't impact hardly anyone at all. And they just are able to freak people out, and it has an impact. And it doesn't seem like social learning is happening where we recognize that they'll say anything in order to get you to vote for them, and they're not held accountable. So, Diego, you seem the best at kind of answering these type of questions. When do people catch on that if you watch a campaign commercial during the 5 o'clock news, it's not information that you can count on?
Look, let me speak for the three of us, right? We are Democrats in Texas. That means that we have a sort of endless reservoir of hope, of belief.
I thought you were going to say hopelessness.
No. maybe we're naive, right? But we keep at it in the face of really daunting odds. That's the first thing, right? Is this sort of never give up attitude. How impossible it must feel to be an immigration attorney in Texas right now. And she's probably working harder and trying harder than she ever has in her whole career, because that's who we are, right? So there's that. But the other thing, again, I think the public is more informed by itself than it ever has been. And what's also happening is this. I can scare you with some boogeyman that may not ever touch your actual life. But what's happening in Texas now, some piece of it, whether it's immigration or the economy or education or the job market, it is making its way into people's homes. So then if you show up and say, hey, there's a guy in the girls' bathroom wearing a wig, you're like, get the fuck out of here. That's not real. You're not talking about the real thing that's happening. That's BS. I think that people's life is what the elected people in Texas are saying is not reflective of what's actually happening in our lives. Maybe it happened in your imagination a couple years ago, but now there are things happening in everyone's life. Something is happening in their life that is not being spoken to. And I think that is the pushback. That is the difference. And I think that's sort of what we've all been pushing for all this time. And I really think we're in a moment where things will change because of it.
All right, so we got to close out here. So, Kate, if you could just, where are we in your practice? What's happening with immigration? Is there light at the end of the tunnel? Is there really hope, or is that a train coming at us?
I'm very hopeful. I'm very hopeful about the midterms and people paying attention. And I think that there are a lot of folks, I mean, we're in an era, of course, it's AI and social media, and people get in these echo chambers, and a lot of folks who are decent humans and well-meaning have intentionally withdrawn or even checked out from their feeds, from the news cycle, but they would be as outraged as all of us are. And so I think that what's really important in the age of AI and social media, when the world is changing around us, is that we actually reach out to the humans and have coffee or lunch, or pick the 5 people that you know who are decent people, and make sure that they see a news article that you think might resonate with them, something from a outlet that you trust, and text it to them. Don't tag them on social media. Actually get this information into the people who would care, except that they don't know. And I think, how to resist is a whole other conversation. And are you out marching? Are you running for office? Are you serving as a politician? Are you on social media? Are you being loud? That requires a level of risk tolerance that a lot of people don't have. But the social network, the supporting, the donating, the talking to your friends, the giving a 5-star review to some immigrant-owned business that you think has really good food, all of that stuff we can do. And if we do something small every single day, we are doing our part and making an impact. And so don't let the overwhelm of the job that needs to be done by our contingent paralyze you. It's the little things that each of us do that are ultimately going to make the impact.
Right. So, Diego, closing comments?
I think I've said enough already. I'm very happy to be here. I was really inspired by these two. Happy to see you again. I think it's just oh, is my mic off? I'm just really happy to be here, guys. Thanks.
Okay. Congressman Joaquin Castro.
No, thank you again for having us, and thank you everybody for speaking up, and for speaking up and for not cowering. If we hide, if we remain silent, if we cower, then this period that we're in will continue on. But I want you to know, because I know sometimes people wonder, and they ask me every week, some people ask me, is it making a difference that I call the congressional offices and the intern answers and I leave a message, or does anybody read my email? And I want to tell you, as somebody who's on the receiving side of those messages, you are making a difference. Your voice does matter, and we will change the politics of this country very soon. So thank you.
All right, thank you to our guests. Thank you all of y'all. Have a great Sunday. And close here.
Wow. What a great discussion. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Sharon Mullen, and I'm one of the co-chairs of this symposium. As we come to an end of today's symposium, I want to take a moment to reflect on what we've heard and to thank the many people who made this gathering possible. First of all, I want to thank our moderator, David Martin Davies. And our outstanding speakers. Let's give them all another round of applause. You brought insight, honesty, and a willingness to engage in a conversation that is complex, emotional, and vitally important to the future of our community and to our country. We are grateful for your time, your expertise, and your public service. In addition, I want to thank today's sponsors, the Elledge Family Foundation, Global Succession Planning, and the Lazarus Gershon Family Fund for their generous support. I also want to extend a deep appreciation to Trinity University for hosting us and providing a space for thoughtful discussion and dialogue and civic engagement. And of course, none of this would be possible without the extraordinary volunteers from the National Council of Jewish Women. AKA the Blue Shirt Ladies. NCJW has always believed that advocacy and action are essential to building a just society, and today is a wonderful example of that commitment. I also want to personally thank my two co-chairs, Alyssa Levy-Bow and Marcia Krasner. Your partnership, creativity, and many hours of hard work made the symposium possible. It has truly been an honor to work alongside you. Today we've talked about immigration, but at its heart, this conversation is really about something much deeper, how we see one another. In Minneapolis, community leaders began using a simple but powerful idea called neighboring. Once we stop seeing people as strangers or others and start seeing them as neighbors, walls come down, understanding grows, and communities become stronger. That spirit of neighboring already exists here in San Antonio. This city has long been shaped by immigrants who brought their cultures, their talents, their work ethic, and dreams, and who've been a vital part of the fabric of this community. Our city is stronger because of it. We know that immigration policy and reform are not simple issues. We all want secure borders, but we also want solutions that are humane, thoughtful, consistent with the democratic values of our country and our community. Conversations like today cannot end when we leave this room. If there is one message that we want you to take away, it is this, that democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires participation. It requires voices. It requires people who are willing to show up and stand up. It also means voting, not just in national elections, but in the local elections that shape our communities every day. School boards, judges, city council members, and state representatives. As we close, I want to thank all of you for being here today, for spending part of your Sunday afternoon with us. For those who brought food donations and or bought stickers, those donations will directly help local immigrants who need our support. And actually, I want to take this time to acknowledge Diane Garcia, who is in our audience. She was one of the faith leaders that actually marched from Dilley to San Antonio just recently. So let's give her. She's with Nuevos Vecinos. I encourage you to take another look at the bookmark that we gave you. It lists organizations in our community that are doing important work supporting immigrants and families. These groups need volunteers, advocates, and supporters. I also invite you to stop by the tables in the foyer on your way out and meet the representatives from these organizations. Learn about what they're doing and how you might get involved. Getting involved can look different for each of us. For some of it is writing a check or scanning a QR code to support an organization financially. For others, it may mean volunteering your time, helping a family navigate resources, or even accompanying someone to immigration court on the right day. San Antonio has always been a city built by people who chose hope and opportunity. Now it's our turn to continue that tradition, to keep building a community where neighboring replaces otherness, and where we help shape the future of our city together. We have these stickers. Together we are San Antonio. Juntos somos San Antonio. Thank you all for being here.